Hogwarts Legacy is a game I look forward to playing ever since it was announced. As someone who was very fond of the Harry Potter franchise growing up, it was a dream come true for me and many other Potterheads for the opportunity to finally sink in our teeth into a proper Harry Potter open world game. There were so many things that I reminisce fondly within the books and movies and couldn't wait to see if this new story, 100 years before the events of the main plot, lived up to the immense hype. I'm gonna make this video spoiler free just in case if people are thinking about buying the game or if people have already played the game and are just looking for a second opinion. Now, for the uninitiated, here's a bit of a brief overview. Hogwarts Legacy is a story set roughly a century before the events of Harry Potter, where you play as an incoming 5th-year student who gets thrown into a chaotic struggle between dark wizards trying to gain control of an ancient form of magic, and the Hogwarts professors trying to preserve those secrets at all costs. There's the traditional RPG setup with a skill tree and scaling armor pieces. The main gameplay loop revolves around various quest lines, either progressing the fight against the dark wizards, going to classes to unlock new spells or features, or quests involving some side characters. The game's main story revolves around Hogwarts, but the open world involves many other towns which can be traversed through Broomflight, which is honestly fucking amazing by the way. It also has like a Pokemon type feature with various magical beasts that players can capture to upgrade their armor towards the mid and late game. Now, as for the review, I'll be grading the game on the following 10 aspects of the game that I deem to be important. Please bear in mind, for the purposes of my grading scale, 50 is considered average. It's not an F, it's considered average. So anything that's like 55 to 60 is an above average game, all things considered. With the basics out of the way, let's get into the review. Starting off, let's get into the plot of the game. The plot of this game is actually just straight up Disney. New kid comes into the school, they have a natural gift for this rare form of ancient magic that these dark wizards are going apeshit over, and so they must learn to harness their power while also taking regular wizarding classes in order to help thwart the dark wizards, while also not being captured by them in the first place. I'm gonna go ahead and give this a 3 out of 10. The only reason it doesn't get a 2 is because the side quest lines are pretty fun and it gives a little bit of juice to what was an otherwise bland, predictable, and formulaic plotline. The biggest problem with the plot is the MC themselves. They are freakishly overpowered. Like, I mean, on their first week of Hogwarts, they're pretty much stronger than like 80% of wizarding kind. And this is someone who just awakened their wizarding powers recently and is joining Hogwarts as a 5th year. Because the MC is so powerful, the plot just becomes this boring train ride where it goes from plot point to plot point without any real sort of foreboding or urgency. And to cap it all off, the villains don't really have much of a motive behind their actions, aside from the generic greed of more power and world domination. I'm a firm believer that the villain's motives are what colors the plot of the story. The villain has to be the problem that the hero eventually grows to beat, and that growth process basically forms the bulk of the plot. So the problem here is twofold. One, the MC is very blatantly overpowered, with the professors constantly filleting them on their magical affinity. There's no real growth that happens from their first encounter with the villain to the final fight, aside from like the typical RPG grinding elements. There was literally no doubt in anyone's mind that they would scale to pretty much single-handedly crush the opposition, a hypothesis that was hilariously proven correct when the MC gets randomly kidnapped in the penultimate fight of the game and wipes out an entire platoon of dark wizards along with one of the two main villains by themselves. The main villain, who has already been introduced at the start of the game, has a very nebulous motive at best. He was wronged by the wizarding world and he wants to get back at them by harnessing the ancient magic in order to trample over the wizarding world with this dark army. The motive, as basic as it is, could have worked if it was done correctly. If they showed him being mistreated in multiple cutscenes, if the writers and the voice actor came together to really show off what this abuse had done to him through either exposition or preferably vocal performance, but none of that really happened and the motive, along with the character, fell flat. The game had a lot of avenues to be a lot more adult themed in its motifs or plot points, which it didn't really deliver on, or they could have done the Disney thing but they could have made it more compelling. And they didn't do that either, so it gets a 3 out of 10. Next up, let's talk about the visuals. Now, the game looks very good, especially Hogwarts and Hogsmeade. It is reimagined almost perfectly from the movies, and you instantly get the feel that you're back in the movie theater when certain quest lines are progressing. The only flaw when it comes to Avalanche's Hogwarts portrayal is that it comes off a little bit too bright and colorful. I remember the Hogwarts in the movies being a little bit more darker, mysterious, and foreboding, and that added to the mystique of the wizarding world. This feel further amplified the whimsical wizarding theme within the books to the movies, and that's something that's unfortunately missing from Avalanche's portrayal, where it portrays Hogwarts in the middle of like a Christmas special or something. I really don't understand with Avalanche's running theme of making this game a little bit too safe, given that most kids these days aren't reading Harry Potter. Shit, most of them aren't even reading at all, and those of us who've read Harry Potter are in our late 20s or early 30s now. What I didn't like about the visuals were the dream environments. I found the specific kind of teal blue that they used for the architecture to be kind of off-putting and sort of depressing actually. As much as I liked the boss fights with the big ass blue knights, that teal blue architecture didn't exactly scream dream sequence to me, and I could never come to appreciate it even after I finished the game. So for their mostly accurate and beautiful portrayal of Hogwarts, I'll give Hogwarts Legacy a 7 out of 10 in terms of visuals. Now we're going to talk about my favorite part of the game, which is the combat. When the game first started making waves, I was initially worried that the combat will be either turn-based or extremely slow-paced, like something akin to Dota. But it is anything but that. The combat in Hogwarts Legacy is extremely fast-paced and reactionary. You're always moving around, turning people into barrels and throwing them into other people, or taking axes off of goblins' hands and sending it flying towards their heads. Certain spells have a certain color code attached to them, so the enemy shielding themselves with a certain color can only have that shield broken through the corresponding spell type. This adds a layer of complexity to the fighting since you can't simply button smash and roll your way through the opposition. I think Avalanche struck a perfect balance between making the combat fun and dynamic while also not making it too convoluted. Actually, I played Hogwarts Legacy right after I finished Elden Ring. The whiplash, I know. And one thing I appreciated about Hogwarts Legacy is that I could hop into the fun of the combat without having to learn or read a whole playlist of videos to know how everything worked. It was refreshing and something I didn't take for granted. However, this is the reason why I'm giving it an 8 out of 10 instead of a perfect score. While I love the low barrier of entry and the little bit of complexity within the fast-paced spell slinging, the combat ultimately has a very low skill ceiling and it sort of becomes like brain-dead fun after a while, even in the hardest difficulty. With a little bit of practice and a few go-to combos, the combat can become somewhat repetitive without the extra layer of complexity and diversity that would make this game's combat truly a 10 out of 10. Next up, let's cover some of the character arcs within Hogwarts Legacy. Now, I'll be honest, this is one of the worst parts of the game. For how Disney the plot is, this game doesn't even try to do the whole Disney thing of having a cliched story arc to follow through. Because, like I keep saying, a cliched thing done well is still better than even the most unique things done poorly. The problem is, the character arcs in Hogwarts Legacy isn't cliched or unique, they're simply non-existent. We've already talked about the main character and the main villain, so I'll keep this part brief. The MC is obviously way too overpowered, and no matter what you choose in the end, they're still the same person they were when they first decided to be transported to Hogwarts. Like, literally the final decision at the end of the game changes fuck all about the trajectory of the story. The villain is an uninspiring cardboard cutout who also does fuck all for most of the game and then gets iced spectacularly in the final fight. The only thing that's stopping me from giving this game a complete 0 out of 10 is 3 characters: Professor Fig, Nansai, and Sebastian. Professor Fig has a good arc considering his wife died in the pursuit of unraveling more secrets about the ancient magic, especially since she wanted to use it to help other people instead of selfish intentions. Nansai, while not as good, follows her journey into uncovering her unique wizarding powers in a new country as she attempts to reconcile her childhood trauma. Given how Disney the rest of the plot was, I was quite pleasantly surprised at how mature and dark Nansai's character arc was, and it was much appreciated. This is proof that the writers in Avalanche are capable of writing good arcs, but for whatever reason they choose not to for the most important characters of the game. But the best character arc is hands down Sebastian's. At times it was so compelling that I felt like he was the main character. He also goes through more character development than most other major characters combined, and given the very intense nature of his questlines and the lengths that he's willing to go to protect the ones he loves. So I'll be giving the character arcs in Hogwarts Legacy a 3 out of 10, one for each good character arc. I might have even given it a 4 for Sebastian's arc alone, but all the main characters' arc pissed me off so much for me to give that little bump, so I'm gonna keep it to a 3. It's one of the most frustrating things about this game. It does so many things right in the technical aspects, but when it comes to narrative, it's a complete letdown. The story falls apart when the main character is literally too broken to need any sort of development, and the villain is just generic as fuck. This rant about an underwhelming plot and character arcs ties neatly in with the next segment, which is voice acting, and that also gets a 3 out of 10. The problem with the voice acting in this game is that it's a ripple effect of the poor plot and character arcs. They're so milquetoast and generic that they don't invoke enough emotion and zeal to let the actors really sink their teeth into the material. Not that the voice actors in this game are particularly good either. Aside from Professor Weasley, there's really nothing to write home about here. Everything is spoken in a light, inundated monotone with that little British wizarding flair that the movies were famous for. Even Sebastian's voice actor did not deliver some of the notes that his story required, which was a huge disappointment given his story. Combined with the lackluster plot and bad voice acting, the emotional basis of this game is honestly quite bad, and it's a disappointing contrast to its more technical and mechanical feats in visuals and combat. Alright, Now let's take a break from this string of L's and this barrage of 3 out of 10s, and let's talk about something in the game that's a little bit more half decent, which is the music. My favorite part about the music is the whimsical ambience that has been synonymous with the wizarding world for over a decade now with the movies. It softly plays in the corner, especially when you're in Hogwarts, which further enhances the immersion you feel during the quests. The problem with this background music is that it's somewhat non-existent in certain parts of open world traversal. There are actually even large patches of my gameplay where I couldn't even hear shit in the background, which was like a huge minus, by the way. Other than that, stuff like the fight music is generally done pretty well. It's quite dramatic and as high octane as witchcraft can be expected to be, and it gets the job done sufficiently. Frankly, the word sufficient is the best way I can describe this game's music. 5 out of 10. Next, let's talk about the open world, where things get a little bit interesting. The open world in Hogwarts Legacy is actually quite good, especially on the surface. It's vast with tons of places to explore and little side quests to complete. However, the size of the open world is about the extent to everything that's good. The actual detail of the open world is where things start going downhill. Even though there are a lot of hamlets in the open world, a lot of them I feel like are just copied and pasted. And some of the side quests associated with them are very basic fetch-based quests that don't really feel engaging to undertake and spend time on. So I'm going to give half points for form of the open world, but I'm going to take the other half for not having anything meaningful within the open world design and some of the content being repetitive. 5 out of 10. Now, I know by this point you guys must think I hate this game despite my seeming love for it and how much I hype it up. I promise you guys that's not true, and let me prove this to you. Game systems and pacing, 10 out of 10. This game is expertly designed when it comes to how the MC scales within the rest of the story. Narratively, yes, it's fucked, but on a game design level, it's perfect. The game introduces new spells and new mechanics at the perfect time within the story, so you feel like your character is growing at the rate perfectly required by the story. Granted, they could have eased the MC's power at the start of the game, but once again, I'm going to put this down on the narrative side of things instead of game systems. Stuff like the talent tree is masterfully crafted with quality upgrades that feel worth putting points at every single stage of the game. Whoever is in charge of the game systems deserves all the praise in the world, because that's something even famous games like Elden Ring or Kingdom Come Deliverance get wrong. For example, in Elden Ring's case, the scaling is too skewed against the early game, where you feel like shit for the majority of the early game before things finally start falling into place. KCD, on the other hand, is comically infamous for its bonkers late game scaling, where the plot doesn't make much sense and the sense of immersion is broken down completely because Henry becomes strong enough to kill off a fucking entire army by himself. So I was very pleased to find out that yes, while the MC is too overpowered from a narrative standpoint, they are perfectly balanced and moving along with respect to the enemies they encounter as the story progresses. Next up, Grindiness. Now, Grindiness is something I feel very strongly about. I don't mind a game being difficult as long as I feel like it isn't difficulty for difficulty's sake. I don't want to spend copious amounts of hours reading guides and watching tutorials on how to solve some dumbass puzzle or to say the correct things to move a questline along. Granted, I don't mind doing it, but I shouldn't feel like I have to do it. And at that front, this game gets a 9 out of 10. Aside from like 1 or 2 puzzles, this game is very self-explanatory and you can progress through all of its content and it doesn't feel like a chore. Combined with the seamless progression schemes, those 35 hours I spent into this game went through in a happy breeze. Which brings us to the last criteria I'll be rating it on, which is enjoyability. This game is very good in concept and visually it delivers a solid performance and nails the immersive side of the Potter universe. Its amazing combat paired with its perfect power scaling and game systems make it a treat to play. It actually even has a decent chunk of replay value. However, I'll be giving it a 7 out of 10 because despite all of its form and foundation, the emotion of the game is ultimately robbed by its poor plot, characterization, and voice acting. As much as I want to like this game for its amazing combat, the lackluster, unvaried open world mixed with the bad plot detracts a significant part of it. So, let's round up the numbers. Plot, 3 out of 10. Visuals, 7 out of 10. Combat, 8 out of 10. Character arcs, 3 out of 10. Voice acting, 3 out of 10. Music, 5 out of 10. Open world, 5 out of 10. Game systems and pacing, 10 out of 10. Grindiness, 9 out of 10. And finally, enjoyability, 7 out of 10. That brings us to a total of 60, which, before you start going apeshit over, is above average in my books. Overall, Hogwarts Legacy is a fun ride that I would definitely recommend to either a Potter fan or gamers who are looking for a new combat experience. While it succeeds in surface level fun and presentation, it ultimately falls short of a meaningful plot or characters, and the voice acting in this game isn't anything to write home about either. If you're not in the market for a fun new combat game, I'd imagine there are other games you should probably try out before Hogwarts Legacy. I still like this game quite quite a bit, and I look forward to its sequel. I just wish they would write a better plot and characters with a richer open world while still retaining the amazing combat and game systems. Then I promise you this IP will truly become something to be reckoned with. Now, that's it from me in this video, guys. Hopefully I was able to shed some light on Hogwarts Legacy if you guys are still thinking of buying it or just wanted a different perspective. Let me know in the comments what you think of my review, and if there's anything you'd like me to consider with the grading process moving forward, and hit the like button while you're there. I'll be running a poll to see which game I should review next, so subscribe and stay tuned to whenever that poll is going to come out. Till next time.